Without any further ado, my good friend here, U.S. Senator uh, Bob Casey, has joined. I just realized that we got Benjamin Martin there. We'll get that name changed for you there, Senator Casey. But hey, welcome. It is always a pleasure to see you, to talk with you, and now for a couple of years now work with you, Senator. And so I was just giving a little bit of an overview of the appropriations and how you have been fighting so much to help support the community. And we'll get into that, but I do want to take a moment to just allow you to say hi and anything you wanted to open up with. But welcome and thank you for being with us.
Oh, Kevin, thanks so much and appreciate you getting us together. Sorry I was running late to hold everybody up here. But I want to commend and salute the community in Lancaster for the work that's been done that undergirds the work of the 211 system. Obviously, no policy coming from Washington or otherwise can effectuate the good work that's been done on the ground. So I want to commend and salute the United Way of Lancaster County, United Ways across the country that are making it possible for us to have the benefits of a good 211 system and all the services and positive impact that has on communities. So we're grateful, and I know that today's one of those days we can celebrate not just 211 and the benefits, but also some federal investment.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of that, I'm hopefully you got the question I sent over after Tuesday's State of the Union. I got to tell you, I was like cheering in my chair when I heard President Biden, in the State of the Union on Tuesday. And I want to read a quote for everyone here in case they didn't catch it. When he addressed issues of police and community relations, he said, quote, "We know police officers put their lives on the line every single night and day. And we ask them in many cases to do too much, to be counselors, social workers, psychologists, responding to drug overdoses, mental health crisis, and so much more. In one sense, we ask much too much of them." Now, Senator, I've often said that instead of the phrase defund the police, a more helpful perspective is thinking about refunding the community. Where are the dollars that the federal budget puts in, the state budgets put in, and even all the way down to the local into the nonprofit social services sector? And so I like to think of how are we refunding it. And your legislation addresses the issue of asking officers to do too much by improving the way that we support the human services available in communities. And so, when I heard that, I was like, that's Senator Casey's HELP Act. That's the Dial Act right there. So can you speak about HELP Act and Dial Act and how those approaches are solutions to the crisis that the president outlined on Tuesday around community safety?
Yeah, first, Kevin, I appreciate you highlighting what he said. I thought the president spoke with a lot of compassion and understanding for those who have been waiting too long, certainly in the Black community, waiting too long for real accountability in policing, but also spoke directly to the challenges that law enforcement officers have when we ask them to do too much, when we ask them to be mental health professionals, when they're not trained to do that, when we ask them to be counselors and social workers. What we need to make sure is when we have a situation that could get out of control, that you have the professionals there, sometimes with law enforcement, but sometimes on their own, can deal with the situation. So that requires not just good thoughts, it requires planning and focus and funding, money. Obviously, you have to invest in better systems. But one thing we can do at the federal level, even prior to the question of funding levels, is to make sure that we're doing everything we can to put a focus on how we can better coordinate all these services, what law enforcement does for a community and what others can do as well. So here's what the HELP Act would do. It's an effort to divert calls that often end up only at 911 and therefore ask officers to respond to everything, not simply violent circumstances or emergencies that require law enforcement's help. They've got to respond to everything. And so this this legislation would divert the following kinds of calls: non-criminal, number one; number two, non-fire; number three, non-medical emergency calls from 911 to state and regional 211 and 988 systems. We should have been doing this a long time ago.
Yeah.
But it's about time we do that. It would also provide support for states to build out their 211 and 988 systems, because these referral systems they don't just pop out of nowhere. You got to have the funding. And a lot of state governments, when you have one level of government, state government or county or local government, having to balance their budgets every single year, and the federal government doesn't provide the help, and God knows, people know well, the federal government's budget isn't balanced, hasn't been balanced in more than 20 years now. But the federal government's got to invest in those entities that have tight budgets and very limited tax bases to support these systems. So help would do that, to provide new funding. And then, of course, you need oversight of these networks to make sure that they're doing the work they should be doing. So we have to move forward at the federal level to do our part. That's one of the best things that the president and the House and the Senate did the last 2 years. Finally, the federal government's in the game, the game to do our part on rebuilding roads and bridges and investing in high-speed internet, in the game and investing in families, saying that, my God, it's pretty damn hard to raise children these days, and when costs are high, even when they're not that high, it's a hard job. And the child tax credit came to the rescue, literally in the American Rescue Plan, to provide in Lancaster County alone 110,000 children and their families with the benefit of some extra dollars every month just to pay for food. Yeah. That's what the child tax, we should call it the child food credit.
Right.
It was to pay for food. So my point is that the federal government's got to be in the game, and in the game means you got to have some funding on the table. And that's why we have to do a lot more than we have been doing.
Yeah, I mean, I forget exactly. I think it was 40% of children were raised out of poverty with the CTC, with the child tax credit. Exactly. And then it ends, and just like that, immediately they're back in poverty. And it's like, if we can make the decision to unilaterally lift children out of poverty, why are we not making that decision? Exactly. It's just mind-boggling. So,
do more of that. Can I add one footnote?
Yeah,
just for the record, for the public record on how people vote, meaning members of Congress, how members of Congress vote. The same people in Washington who say over and over again, they accuse Democrats categorically of not supporting law enforcement, right? They told a lie over and over again about defund the police. It was a lie, but they told it. And they also don't support a whole range of other programs on a regular basis that would provide the kind of support in the community, as you said, to invest in the community. I think you said or refund the community. So these same members of Congress who talk and talk and talk about law enforcement actually don't support either. Here are the facts.
It's a great question. It's a great question about law enforcement and support.
Yeah.
You got this program. You're diverting calls from 911. How do they feel about that? I mean, are the police looking at this and saying, "Hey, Senator Casey's trying to take our money"? Because it's not always just about what we think. It's also about the people who are impacted, what they think. So can you talk about the HELP Act and how law enforcement sees this? Do they see this as a threat, or what's their response?
No, law enforcement supports it because they know it'll help them do their jobs in a manner that is consistent with how they're trained and what they want to do every day. Most law enforcement officers want to go out every day and do everything they can to fight crime and to hold people accountable. Now we've got to do more to hold those who don't want to do that kind of work and hold them accountable when they violate the constitutional rights of individuals. But the law enforcement's been supportive. But my point about the voting is we had a test in December of last year, right before the holidays, so no one knew about it because it passes and it moves on. Big appropriations bill, right? You had 87% of one party voting against that bill. What did they vote against? Well, we could be here for 7 hours listing everything they voted against. But when they voted,
I got time if you got time.
when almost 90% of that side of the aisle voted no on that bill, guess what they voted against? They voted against all the money, every single penny for law enforcement, because we have ongoing appropriations every year for the burn justice grants and for the COPS program and for so much else. But they also voted against all the help for the communities that we're talking about as well. They voted against all the money for opioid substance use disorder. That was $4.9 billion. They voted against programs for childcare, $8 billion for childcare. They voted for zero. The Women, Infants, and Children's program is a $6 billion program. 90% of them voted for zero for that. They voted against all the money for national security, the national defense. They voted against the. So my point is that if you're going to preach and preach about your support for law enforcement and point the finger at my side of the aisle and point the finger about this or that, you ought to at least vote for the programs.
Right. So, you know, when you think about appropriations, you know, I mean, they get a rap. Some would say a bad rap, right? I mean, the pork belly or whatever, not pork belly. Pork belly is a delicious dinner. The pork barrel spending, they say, right? So when you think about appropriations, some people use those as political payback for donor, that kind of thing. When I ran through your list of 92, I saw a lot of community stuff. I mean, I was looking, you know, I like to be critical, and I didn't see a whole lot of things other than really helping the community. So what sort of, and you know, we've got about 200 people in the room here watching you and I talk, and most of them are in the nonprofit sector. And I'm getting emails saying, Kevin, how did you get an appropriation? You know, what motivates you in that space? How can these individuals who are doing amazing work in our community here, you know, how can they get access to resources and support? What would you give them advice saying, hey, this is what motivates us as a team here, myself as a senator, you know, why do you care about appropriations? Why do you support it? Our recently outgoing Senator Pat Toomey explicitly said he would never support them no matter what they were. Can you help us understand your motivations?
Yeah, look, some members of Congress don't believe in this process of individuals, a citizen or a group of citizens who represent an organization, say a nonprofit, petitioning their government and saying we have a funding priority here for this 1 year. They obviously have it for more than 1 year, but for the appropriations process on congressionally directed spending, it's a 1 year ask. And they come to Washington to say, can we have some of those tax dollars that we have sent to Washington for this project that the community has agreed upon, that there's consensus behind, that there's data to support, there's a track record that is the foundation of our ask of our government. That's a process we should support. I am very, very proud of every penny that we get through this process. Now, the only problem was we didn't have it for 10 years. 10 years, a whole decade, right? And we were told that if you get rid of these projects that are supported by members of Congress, world peace will break out, and everyone will love each other, and Congress will get along better. Well, just the opposite happened. Look, I got elected by the people of Pennsylvania. I know a lot more about Lancaster County or the city of Lancaster or the communities in that region than some bureaucrat in Washington. I got elected. If that bureaucrat wants to represent Pennsylvania, they should run for the office and get elected. But I got elected, so I'm going to do everything I can to get every penny that I can for these projects. The last thing I'll say is this: I'm not just proud of the award and the benefit they bring to communities. Something on the order of, as you said, 92 different projects. But I'm also really proud of the process. I have great respect for what taxpayers do every day when they send their money to Harrisburg or Washington or at the local level or county level. And this process should be worthy of the sweat equity and the hard work that those taxpayers put forth. So we have a rigorous process. First year we had this in place. We're into our third year now, but our first year, not even 10% of the projects got funded. Mm-hmm. So it's a high bar because the funding is limited, but it's also a high bar because you have to jump over hoop after hoop after hoop, surmount a lot of obstacles to get this funding. You get a lot of scrutiny by us and by our team, and then you have scrutiny by others, including the entire Appropriations Committee staff, and they're pretty tough customers. So when this award is made, you have surmounted a lot of obstacles to get it. You should be proud as well, because this isn't some willy-nilly process like it was in the 1950s or 60s or 70s, where a member of Congress could walk in and virtually ask for whatever they wanted with very little scrutiny. There is a lot of transparency here, and it should be transparent. And I want to be held accountable if something doesn't work out well. So I will be.
Sam, that we had gone through this process, and yeah, I mean, we're still going through because our ask wasn't fully funded. So now we got to go back and be specific about what we're going to use those resources that were less than the fully funded request. And so, it's not just now you got half of them, you got slush fund, right? Like, and so we've been really grateful for that process and that rigorous process. We've been grateful because for us, it was not just the work of 2-in-1 and all of our partners who work with us. The High Foundation here gave us $80,000 2 years in a row to go from idea to iteration. And so when we came to you all, we were able to say, look, we've got some money here. We've got $50,000 from Abilities in Motion. We've got $20,000 from Don Meyer, Personal Citizen. You have all that support. And then your team said, hey, look, we're going to give you some resources, but you got to go back to the community also and continue to. We're not just going to do it all for you. So really appreciate that process and wanted the people here to hear from you why you value it and sort of how it operates. I did want to say, we've worked and we've had wonderful conversations, you and I, on a lot of panels with police officers, with citizens who lost families' lives. And they've been really, they've moved me. I've been honored to be a part of those conversations. And that helped to get to the HELP Act, right? Mm-hmm. Now, just the last time I was meeting with your team, they started talking about the Dial Act. And I'm curious about if you want to talk about that a little, because I think that also really impacts the people who are interested in this conversation today and how they might be involved.
Yeah, it's one of those instances where you can't have progress often without data and without the requisite information that you need as a foundation for good policy. And Dial, what we're trying to do is to first of all have kind of a national conversation about this and get the best folks in the same room nationally to begin to have to collect the data and to get the information you need. So here's what we do in particular. It's a National Advisory Council on, it's a long one, I'll give it all to you. Disability status and law enforcement interaction data collection, right? That's a tall order for that council. But their job is going to be, and the statute, when passed, would task them with the following: developing collection and reporting methodologies and provide recommendations to the Attorney General on best practices. Sometimes you've got to gather what's already being done well in communities across the country. If one community doesn't know about that, or the nation doesn't know about it, it's hard to replicate or to grow that kind of best practice. So that collection is going to be critically important. Getting data, not just numbers, but getting information about what's working. And this is in furtherance of the goal of making sure that we're doing everything possible to reduce the likelihood, as we try to do in all these bills, and as I know 211 and so much other work that's getting done out there, to reduce the likelihood that you'll have these interactions that are often violent, in many cases deadly, as you know, between law enforcement and someone who's having a mental health crisis or having some other crisis in their life or problem that puts them at risk and puts the community at risk. So, as I said, we should have been doing this decades ago, but we're just beginning to realize that there are steps we can take to reduce the likelihood. No one's talking about a magic wand. No one's talking about a perfect system. No one's talking about wiping out a problem, but we're talking about doing everything we can to reduce the likelihood. If we save one life or prevent one tragic, violent interaction, every bit of work that goes into passing these bills will be worthwhile. But I think we're going to do a lot more than save one life.
Yeah, and again, I appreciate you thinking about this. My previous time as the director of Meals on Wheels, the work that you do on the aging, and now also disabilities, I've been able to see for years now and really appreciate it. So we're running low on time here. I got two real quick sort of softball ones. Again, you've got a couple hundred people from the nonprofit sector listening actively right now. What would you say to the nonprofit sector, the social service sector, in the community? What's a message from you for that group?
Well, first of all, I want to commend the work that gets done in the nonprofit sector. It's the work in a community that is closest to the community, is often most reflective of what's happening in that community, both the challenges and the marks of progress and growth, positive growth in a community. But also, what I like best about the nonprofit sector and the people, of course, that lead nonprofit organizations or work in them, is that as they're laboring in the vineyard, so to speak, every day in the community, solving problems, lifting people up, affirming the dignity of people, you all do it in such a manner that provides inspiration to the rest of us who aren't doing that work every day, but try where we can to help. And what's most inspiring about the nonprofit sector is how mission driven you all are. That you come to work every day saying, I'm going to do something today that's going to improve someone's life, or the life of their family, or more broadly, the life of the community. I know you don't do it because you're making these gargantuan salaries. The nonprofit sector ain't Wall Street. You're not going to work every day and driving home with a trunk full of money, and that's your reward. Your reward in nonprofit work is the work you can do to help people, how you can serve others by the work that you do. We're in February, so I'll quote Martin Luther King, as we often do. But one of the best things he ever said wasn't contained in the I Have a Dream speech. It was what he said about service, because it's about all of us. He said, everyone can be great because everyone can serve. And he was talking about, I believe, greatness, not in the usual American cultural definition of that, not greatness by way of acclaim or notoriety or fame or fortune. He was talking about greatness in terms of what you can give back to a community. And so by that definition that Martin Luther King set forth, you all in the nonprofit community are great. You're great people for your community. You've achieved a level of greatness that many of us will never achieve.
Well, I appreciate that. I also want to just mention that while we don't do it for the money, we do get paid, many of us. And so I will continue to also always advocate that the individuals who are in this room behind me are heroes and should be compensated well for the excellent work.
Yep.
Since the 1970s, poverty has hovered between 12 and 14%. The nonprofit community contributes about $6 billion to GDP, but we only receive about 6% of the GDP. We only receive about 3 to 4% of it back. And so we actually are economic contributors, even though we're job creators, right? In Lancaster, the largest job sector is the nonprofit sector. We're job creator, all those things you hear, we do as well. So I do appreciate the way in which you bring funding to our communities. I think we need to continue to think about how we encourage tax deductions for charitable giving. We've been discouraging it by raising the standard deduction and doing some of those things. I think we need to continue to incentivize those who have the resources to contribute in a way that helps us, like you talked about the appropriations. Individuals, they can do a tax write-off because they had a business loss, but also giving them the opportunity to go, they know down the street is a problem, and being able to get rewarded by the government by choosing to give those resources. I think we want to continue to think about that and understand that, yes, we do it because we have a deep heart and care for our communities, but too often the individuals who are serving the community also have to receive the supports of the organizations and the programs to which they're doing, because they're paid so little that they qualify. And I think we need to figure that out a little bit better too. But I do continue to appreciate you. The last softball question is simply this. Senator, you've come to talk to us and tell us that you're here to help support us. what is it that we can do to help support getting the passage of help and dial? What are practical things that we here can do to get that on the president's desk, right? Because on Tuesday, the only thing I was disappointed is that he didn't say, and that's why we're pushing forward Senator Casey's Help Act. Right? How do we get that to be top of mind across the country? What can we do to help you?
Well, if he did that, that would get him in trouble with 434 other people, members of Congress. No, but look, I think that in a word, it's advocacy, which I know you all do pretty well. You're all experts at effective advocacy, but advocating for passage. And sometimes that's the kind of what I call an old coal region reference, pick and shovel work. The pick and shovel work of lining up co-sponsors and getting help. We're going to need, no pun intended when I use the word help, but we're going to need help on and support co-sponsorship on both sides of the aisle, both houses. And let me say it this way, a lot of people are predicting gloom and doom about this Congress. Oh my God, it's a House controlled by Republicans and Democrats in the Senate. Oh, nothing will happen. We have a lot of Eeyores out there. Let's try to be the opposite of Eeyore and say we can get things done. When the House is that close, a couple of seats away, we can cobble together a winning majority in the House to get something done. In the Senate, the same is true. I mean, I'm happy that my side is 51 rather than 50 or 49, but 51 ain't much. It's pretty close. And if we can either sit there and stare at each other and yell at each other for 2 years, or we can get stuff done. And I think there's probably a way to get something done on something as fundamental as this, especially when you have communities that need help on a whole range of issues that involve human services and what families or communities are up against. And you also have a lot of debate about policing and criminal justice reform and so much else. These bills are ways to kind of advance the ball as we think about the Eagles' fortunes this weekend, advancing the ball, advancing the ball to make sure that we get into the end zone, so to speak, of success on providing communities what they need. So in that moment of crisis, the right people show up, the people that can do the work, and we can let law enforcement be tasked with other important work in the community that they have to do, very dangerous work, but work that they often are pulled away from or don't have time for because they're dealing with 900 different kinds of calls.
Hey, thank you. It's always a pleasure. Love working with your team. Love the conversations we've been able to have over the past couple of years. Really appreciate the work you're doing, the legislation you're putting forth, the work you're doing on the aging and the disabilities community there as well. It's an honor to be able to speak with you, and we'll work at getting new Senator John Fetterman. We wish him luck in recovery with his health issues. Wish you luck with your upcoming surgeries, and really just absolutely grateful, Senator, for the time.
Kevin, thank you. And I want to thank all those who are representing the nonprofit community who are with you today. And of course, we're grateful for the work of the United Way.
Absolutely. We'll talk again, I'm sure. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.